Within the last few years, there has been a big change in our society. With the rise of social media, our self-image became a huge role in our day-to-day lives, and especially the gym has become a hotspot for people who want to better themselves. In this video, we'll go through the history of bodybuilding and why it has become one of the biggest industries in recent years. Let's begin with the history of bodybuilding. The Bronze Era was started by Eugene Sandow, who is known as the father of bodybuilding. Sandow had competed as a strongman for some time, but in 1894 he started posing during his shows. This posing was the start of bodybuilding itself, as it moved the audience's attention towards the body and away from his strength. Back then, weight training was limited to barbells and dumbbells. Diets varied but were generally similar to that of strongmen, which built muscle but also brought fat with it, and steroids were decades away from being created. This period was essentially bodybuilding's Wild West. Just as there can be no mistaking the Bronze Era started with Eugene Sandow, the same can be said of the Silver Era and John Grimek. Grimek was a weightlifter before becoming a bodybuilder and even competed in the 1936 Olympics for the US. Grimek's burst onto the bodybuilding scene occurred when he won the AAU Mr. America contest in 1940. No one had seen a bodybuilder with the size and shape of Grimek before. He would win the AAU Mr. America contest again in 1941, causing the AAU to create a rule where a previous Mr. America winner could not compete in future contests. Bodybuilding saw a modest rise in popularity during the Silver Era as gyms became more common and many contests were staged annually. Interest in bodybuilding would accelerate in the late 1950s as Steve Reeves appeared in movies as Hercules and young boys who admired him starting lifting weights to achieve his looks. The use of steroids in the early 1960s was the beginning of the Golden Era. Golden Era bodybuilders would test these new drugs on themselves throughout the decade, fine-tuning what worked and didn't. Natural bodybuilders soon learned that in order to keep up, they would have to use drugs or watch bodybuilding competitions from the stands. The effects of steroids on health were not known at this time, and most of these drugs could be purchased easily with the prescription of a doctor. Although steroids were used by virtually all competitors towards the end of the era, bodybuilders' physiques were still generally symmetrical and aesthetic. Many competitors from this era claimed steroids were only used for the last month or two before a competition to give them a more polished look. The Golden Era saw a huge rise in popularity towards its end as pumping iron was produced and Arnold Schwarzenegger started his rise to the top of Hollywood with the Conan movies. The Hane era was largely defined by Lee Hane's dominance of bodybuilding. Although not a modern-day mass monster, Hane was the precursor to them as he still had shape but was pushing the limits of aesthetic muscle. He was more of a hybrid bodybuilder, in that he did not fit with the symmetrical bodybuilders of the Golden Era, but didn't quite have the mass necessary to compete against those from the mass era. Many bodybuilding historians believe Hane would have been the first bodybuilder to halt Schwarzenegger's Mr. Olympia streak had Schwarzenegger continued competing instead of entering the movies. The current mass era was ushered in by Dorian Yates' rise to Mr. Olympia in 1992. It was clear that Yates was a different kind of bodybuilder than what we'd been seeing before. Dorian would continue to get bigger every year and would eventually succumb to a bloated waist in his last year of competition, which he attributed to insulin usage. Ronnie Coleman would surpass Yates and become the poster child for the mass era, as no one to this day has passed him in size, except maybe Markus Rühl. The mass era has and is still being defined by who can pack the most muscle on the body. This has led to bloated stomachs, which have finally been negatively judged over the last years. Steroids are what define this era more than anything else, as the variations available have skyrocketed since the Golden Era. Technology keeps creating more intense steroids, which has created bigger bodybuilders. Now that we have a better understanding on the history of bodybuilding, we can conclude on why the sport has become so popular over time. One of the main reasons as of why bodybuilding has become so famous over the last years is definitely the movie industry, and especially the movies with Arnold in it. From young to old, people all across the world were running into the cinemas looking up to the great Conan and the Terminator. Strong, big and good looking. Everybody wanted to be like him. Even your grandpa. Another reason why the sport of bodybuilding is growing so fast is the rise of social media and the growth in a positive self-image. Everyone on social media wants to present themselves in the best way possible, and one of the ways to achieve this is to hit the gym and watch your diet. And honestly, a muscular body is without a doubt a sign of hard work, dedication and discipline. I mean, if you can dedicate your whole life to this sport, I will respect you, your family will respect you, and even your high school teacher who never believed in you will respect you. With this being said, hit the gym.